Kia ora koutou katoa. I'm Uncle Gray, and this is a brief tutorial on using Touch Designer components inside of Resolume with the FFGL Touch Engine plugin. This is a really cool plugin created by Evan Clark, and what it allows us to do is to run Touch Designer components live within Resolume without having Touch Designer open. Basically simplifies the whole workflow if you're using both Resolume and Touch Designer, so you can combine both of them inside of Resolume and you don't need to keep juggling the two windows and software when you're VJing live. I've personally been using it for over a year and found it super useful since I started as a Resolume VJ and then have more transitioned into a Touch Designer VJ. But basically it allows me to VJ my live visuals that I've created with Touch Designer inside of Resolume. Cool, so I'm going to go through how to install it and how to use it, and then going to go into a brief beginner's guide on how to create components within Touch Designer for use with this plugin with Resolume. Cool, so here is the GitHub page for the Touch Engine plugin, and here you can see if we scroll down to the README, lots of good info. The TLDR is that basically you need a Touch Designer license for this to work, educational, commercial, or pro, and that Touch Engine and Resolume must run on the same GPU. So that's the gist of it. There's also this very important example folder up here that's got a bunch of different example.tox files to go through and check out and see what different parameters you can use and how they look inside of Resolume. So definitely recommend checking all of these out and having an explore. Now to download and install the plugin, you go over here to the releases. My latest release is 2.0.4, but there might be a different version when you're following this tutorial. So just click on that and then click the version that your computer is. So I've got a Windows, I'm going to download the Windows zip file and just save it to your downloads folder or wherever you want. Here we can see I've downloaded the zip file, right click, extract all, and that'll create this folder here, and there's 5 files inside. So you've got the README and a version, and then 3 DLL files. Now these 3 DLL files are basically what we want. We want to copy and paste them and put them into our effects folder for Resolume. So for me that's in Documents, Resolume Arena, Extra Effects. And then here you can see I've already got the 3 DLL files for the Touch Engine effect. And that's it. That's it installed on your computer. So then if you go over to Resolume, in the effects pane, you should be able to search for Touch, and you can see the Touch Engine effect come up, and we can just drag and drop this onto a clip slot. Now over here in the clip settings you'll see there's a tox file load, or you can just drag and drop the file there, a reload, unload, and a clear instance. So first let's just load the tox file we want, and I'm just going to load one of these example files, this noise one, just so you can see what's going on, and then let's activate the clip. And here you can see there's just this noise texture that's rendering from Touch Designer. And we've got these 5 different parameters here: test float, test int, test bool, test string, and test switch. So test float is this slider that allows us to shift the texture up and down. Test int changes our font size, so if I set it to 50, our font size gets a lot smaller, and if I set it to 500, it gets a lot bigger. Test bool is this toggle that you can click on and off and gives an edge detection effect here. Test string is this string where you can change the text that's displayed, so I'll just set it to display, and then that there is display, and I'll bring this down a bit, there we go. And then test switch is just this pulse that you can hold down that just displays a different colorway basically. Cool. So basically this was all created within TouchDesigner and it's just being used here within Resolume. You've also got the reload, unload and clear instance, and unload does what it says. It basically unloads it and stops it from being rendered on your GPU. And then reload will again bring it back. Clear instance, that will unload and clear the memory basically in your RAM and your VRAM. So now when I reload, it'll take another second to come back. There we go. But if I just unload and then reload is very quick because all that data is still saved. Cool, so now I'll show you one of my workflows that I have created. Document. Here is a, where is it? Oh, right, end live, my bad. Here we go. So let's activate it, and it's basically this pseudo Voronoi kind of effect that's been created. I created this using a Electronaut tutorial that I'll link to down below. But here we have a kind of a speed control. Slows things down or speeds up. Then a zoom, so you can zoom into it or out depending on the slider and the speed that it goes. You can change. This res index changes the resolution from HD, 2K and 4K. But you can also just have integer values for resolution. This blur and the slope strength changes basically how the Voronoi looks. So if you increase the blur, they get thicker. And if you increase the slope strength, they get thinner. Or if you decrease it, they also get thinner. Thicker, sorry. And then I've got a palette, which just cycles through a few different colorways, and then black and white. And then a reset that resets the feedback loop. Cool, so yeah, this is basically an example of what you can do with it and how you have these parameters to control. So usually I would map these parameters to sliders or buttons on my MIDI controller, and then live I can pulse them or set them to be connected to the BPM or the external FFT, which is basically the audio signal coming into your computer, or a BPM sync, a tap BPM sync, if I didn't have an audio signal. And these are basically just like any other Resolume plugins, and you can envelope them as well and have all of these other settings active for each of these parameters. You can also stack more effects onto here. So if I add a colorize, you can see under this Touch Engine you can add more effects like this colorize. And if I go palette mode, that should Anyway, basically you can add more colors and add all of the good Resolume effects that you want to below. Awesome, so now let's go into TouchDesigner and let's see how we can create these components. Cool, so this is TouchDesigner, and I'm just going to drag and drop the noise example first so we can see what that looks like. So here we've got our, it says test, and here we can see in our container, got this custom page here with all of these 5 different parameters that we used in Resolume that, change how the visual looks. So to create these, we can either press tab, go to comp, and then drop down a container or a base. I usually just keep it simple and use a base, but you can also use a container. And then within the base you can drop a out top. Now each component to be used with this plugin needs an out top because that feeds the video out into Resolume. Now you can also do it, so for example I had a noise here, it was connected to a null. if this could just be a noise, one component, or heaps of component in a whole network that's rendering. And you can select it all and right click on any empty space and collapse select it. And that'll create this base component too. So effectively does the same thing, and it's already got this out, and if we go in we can see it's already got this out top created. So let's just keep using this base 2, and now I'm just going to create an example visual with some parameters that we're going to create with some parameters that we're going to add to our component to use them inside Resolume. So here you can see the base, there's no actual page yet with all these parameters, so that's what we're going to add. So first I'll just make the visual, so in the noise I'll just set the resolution to 1920 by 1080 because that's what I'm running in Resolume. Now I would recommend that you set this dynamically and basically parameterize what this resolution is, so you can change it on the fly if you're ever VJing a gig that has different resolution than the standard. HD 2K or 4K. But for now, for the example, we're just going to leave it static at 1920 by 1080. Take the period up, the harmonics down, enter a lookup. And below we're going to add a ramp, a constant, and feed the constant into the lookup there. And after the lookup, we're going to create a text top. And above the noise, we're going to create a speed chop. I'm going to set the speed to 0.5, make the viewer active, and then drag it into the noise, into the transform tab, and over the translate Z, and set it as chop reference. And that'll animate this. And now I'll just make this viewer active of the noise, so we can see it over here. Then next in our text, in font, I'm going to set auto size to auto fit always. And then output, I'm going to set the operation to difference. Next in our ramp, I'm going to set the period to be 1 divided by 10. So you get a bunch of these cool looking lines. And then in the constant, this is where we're going to control our color. So I might just set the red to 0. So you get this cool kind of teal and red combinated looking visual. Now, let's say for argument's sake that I'm super happy with this, and this is all I want, and now I need to create the parameters in my parent component. So if we zoom out in this base 2, it still doesn't have any parameters here. Now to create those, we can right click and go customize component, and that'll bring up this component editor dialog. Or if we're inside, we can just right click on empty space and select this customize parent component option, and it'll bring up this same component editor dialog. Now with this component editor, basically you have a page name here, a parameter name, and then these are your different parameter types in this menu. I'm not going to go through an exhaustive list of which ones you can and can't use with this component, but if you're more interested, just check out all of those example files. Right click on the components, customize component, and then it'll bring up this menu and you can kind of check out what different types of parameter are possible. So for now, let's say I want to animate this speed and the speed chop, so I can control how fast and how slow it goes. So I'm going to create a parameter called speed, and I'm going to set it to be a float. And add that parameter. And then you can see here it's added this parameter and a page called custom. Now we could now zoom out, click on our base, and we can see that there is this page called custom with this parameter called speed. However, if we're inside here in our component editor, we can click on this little bullet point list, and that'll open this parameter window, which is that basically that dialog option of the parameters of this parent component that we're currently editing, and we can see the speed is there. Or we can right click on empty space and go open parent parameters. And that'll bring up the exact same dialog. So I'm just going to put this over here so as we add different parameters we can see what's going on. So now we've got a speed here, but right now it doesn't actually control anything or do anything. So to have it do something, we're going to have to select this speed, drag it over to our speed chop, and paste it as a reference. Now it controls the actual speed of the visual, which is awesome. Cool, so that's what we want. Now there is another way, a faster way to do this. So if I just delete the speed parameter, now this is going to go all X, so I'll just set it back to a constant value. We can just directly take this speed parameter that we want to map and drag it directly into our component editor. And it'll do the exact same thing. We want to set reference expression on source. And that's done the exact same thing. It's created the speed parameter, and then it's linked this speed parameter to this speed chop that actually controls the speed here. Now it has changed the range. So from before it was from 0 to 1, and now it's from -1 to 1. In our component editor, we can see that here the range min is now set to -1. So I'm just going to reset that to 0. And then here you can see in our range, it's now 0 to 1. So the reason I want to set this to 0 as 1 is for floats, when you take them into Resolume, their range is always going to be between 0 and 1. And this range min and range max doesn't really matter. When they're imported into Resolume, it'll always be 0 and 1. So I'm just keeping this the same, 0 and 1, so that I can mimic, see in this dialog how it'll feel within Resolume. If, for example, I decided that speed at 1 wasn't fast enough and I wanted it to be faster, I could multiply the speed in here by 2. And that'll mean when this is set to 1, it's actually at a speed of 2. When it's at 0.5, it's at a speed of 1, and when it's at 0, it stops. Basically, it just gives it more speed, so you have more control over the speed within Resolume. But for now, I think this is fast enough for me, so I'm just going to leave it like that. Cool, so what other parameters do we want to add and have control over? So I definitely want to do the text. So I'm going to drag and drop that into the component editor, set reference expression on source. See, we have a text option. I also want this operation that we changed in here in output. So I'm going to drag that operation over into our component editor and set reference expression on source. And then you can see here there's this big menu with all these different options. And otherwise, if we created that component, this parameter manually in the component editor, we'd have to select menu, and then we'd have to manually write out all these different options in here. Add, a top, brightest, burn, all of these. So this is a really quick and easy way to not have to do that and to have lots of different options. I'm also going to want to control the color. So I'm going to take the color, drag and drop that in here, set reference expression on source. You can see our color pop up in our parameter window. Now for this ramp, I want to control the number of lines in this ramp. So how many there? Right now there's 10 lines in the ramp, but the period's got to be 1 divided by 10. Now we could just drag and drop the period in here, set reference expression on source, and then I'm just going to change this range max to be 1. But I don't really like this because as you slide the slider up, you get less lines, and as you bring it down, you get more lines, which is really counterintuitive for me. I want to have it as I slide the slider up, I get more lines, and as I slide it down, I get less lines. Or better yet, not even have a slider at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this parameter. I'm just going to set that to a constant again. I'm going to create a parameter called line number, set it to be an integer, and then I can manually control with this integer how many lines are created precisely. So then what I could do is I could set this line number value to 10, drag and drop it onto this period here, set it as reference, and then you can see in here it has a value of 10. And I don't want it to have a value of 10, I want it to have a value of 1 divided by 10. So we can go 1 divided by the parent line number, and we'll get our desired effect. We'll get 10 lines in this ramp. I will briefly show you another way to do it using the parameter chop. So in this parameter chop, you basically get all of the different parameters in your parent component access to in a chop form. So you can see here we've got our speed, our text, because text is a string, not a value, so it just goes to 0. Our operand, so difference is the 9th option in the list. A color red, which is 0, a color green, a color blue, and our line number. So right now I only care about the line number, so I'm going to go to the parameters and just select line number. Then in order to do this 1 divided by operation, I'm going to set down math, and pre-op select inverse. And that'll set our value to be 0.1. It's effectively the same as doing this 1 divided by number, 1 divided by 10. And I'm going to put a null afterwards for good practice, make the viewer active, and drag this null into this period. Now this does the exact same thing that we did before, just in a few more steps and using the parameter chop. However, this would be a lot more useful if we wanted to do a more complicated transformation rather than just inverse. There was a few steps and we had to use a few different operators. This is a lot easier way to do it than to write a big long mathematical expression out in this small dialog window. Basically, I just wanted to expose you different ways of doing the same thing and different ways of using these parameters within your projects. Cool, so we can close this component editor and we've got a bunch of options here we can use to control our visual. So I'm happy with it. Now if we zoom out, you can see our base. We can now see there's a custom page with all of these options. I'll just call this example. We could go add, back to difference. I like difference. Now I'm going to rename this from base 2 to example. And now to save this component, all you need to do is right click on it, save component.tox. Find a nice place to save it. For me that's in derivative palette, and then I've created a folder called live. Save it. Cool. And then that's it. We can go into Resolume now. Drop down our Touch Designer Touch Engine component. Load our tox file. And we see nothing because our colors are set to 0. But as we increase our colors, we see our visual again, and I'll change the operation down to difference. Cool, so we've got this visual that we've created with all these components now controllable from Resolume. So that's basically the how to use it. Now there are a few limitations with this, and that's basically the differences. So this isn't a video clip. It's basically a piece of code that Resolume is running. And now that's different to clips, because clips is basically a series of data that Resolume's just replaying. Now both use your GPU, but these live coded visuals made with Touch Designer and the Touch Engine effect can be a lot more resource intensive. Basically they're a lot tougher for your computer to create them. And so you basically, I really recommend having your stats active. And if you go into Resolume View, FPS and Stats, and just keep an eye on your RAM and your VRAM and your FPS to see if using a bunch of these effects and having a bunch of them opening a window is dropping your FPS and taking up all your VRAM, because those have happened to me before when I've got 5 to 10 of these effects all running simultaneously. So a way to basically reduce the workload really simple and effective way is to keep your first, how to view within Touch Designer how much bandwidth on your computer it's taking, so how heavy it is, basically how heavy an image it is, how tough is it for your computer to render it. And if you middle mouse button on the component, you can see down here the children GPU cook time. That's basically the thing we're interested. The CPU too. The CPU will again use CPU here, but it's more common that it'll be your GPU that you're actually is the limiting factor. So you can see it's taking 0.3 milliseconds on average to render this component, which isn't a lot. That's 1/3 of a thousandth of a second. So not a lot at all. You know, you're rendering about 60 frames per second, give or take. For most things, you know, it could be rendered higher, but I usually cap mine out at 60 because usually that's the hardware that I'm connected to. Usually that's the cap on that. Sometimes it's even less, sometimes it's even 30. But basically, you know, if you were at 1/60th of a second, that would be just at the limit of what's possible to being rendered, and this is well below that. So it's a very efficient, simple network that won't take a lot of resources. But if you had a more complicated one, this might be higher. It might be at 100 milliseconds or 10 milliseconds. That would be something to keep an eye on, that it doesn't get too big. Something that you can do, an easy thing you can do, is checking out your pixel format. So if I middle mouse button on this noise, down here we can see the format is 8-bit fixed RGBA. This is what I would recommend for all of the components that you create for using with TouchEngine, purely because Resolume defaults to 8-bit color depth as well. Within Resolume, if you go to composition settings, you can see 8-bit color. That's what it defaults to. You can change it to 16, but 8-bit is usually plenty. And then within Touch Designer, you can change your pixel format from 8, 16 to 32. For example, if you had hardware that was 16-bit and you wanted to use 16-bit, go for it. But there's really no point in using 32-bit float here and then only rendering out 8-bit within Resolume. It just means you're calculating unnecessary, you're making unnecessary calculations. There's also a tutorial by the Interactive and Immersive HQ that I'll link to down below that go through some really basic ways to make your Touch Designer components more efficient. But yeah, it's just something to keep an eye on as you add more of these components into your Resolume workflow, that it can take up more and more and more of your GPU rendering. The way to basically stop that, if you have a bunch and you don't need them all at the same time, is to unload them. And then if you're having problems with your VRAM and your RAM filling up, then you want to clear the instance. Now I have also had some instances where it seems to have glitched out, where clearing instance doesn't actually clear the space in the VRAM it uses, and I need to right click and clear the effect completely. Which is annoying, but sometimes at runtime you need to do what you need to do to keep the show going. Awesome. So that's about it for this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments below, and of course all credit for the TouchEngine effect goes to Evan Clark. And yeah, all those links will be down in the description below. Thank you, have a good day, cheer.